Vitaly friends, I am Vitaly Portnikov of the German Der Spiegel. We get to know our Chetokiev from the details of a closed telephone exchange between European leaders by the president. I would not say it again, because we will find out the sensation that I am just cutting for American and European politics, and bagging the Ukraine of the European Union to Britain with the received states and the administration of Donald Trump. I refer to the European leaders, for the fact that they are imposed with Britain's good bags for the administration, not with Donald Trump, and all in order to preserve Euro-Atlantic solidarity. In my mind, I will perfectly notify the inadequacy of the people, the yaks came to the Lord, with the received states on the cob of 2025 rock. And the fact that the entire administration is on hand to Zara Ukraine in our beard with Russian aggression. The federal chancellor is not Friedrich Merz. With the receipt of the state, it can take Ukraine without a guarantee to territorial actions. However, I will not specify about Yaki guarantees from the side received in the state, in Friedrich Merz. And on the topic of such a problem of European and light policy, we will discuss the categories, as we cannot on the dates of a specific realistic one, but according to the opponent. They are not ready for the acceptance of such categories either. And on the tilki with the received states of Ukraine, the European Union, closing nuclear France, Ukraine NATO, closing nuclear Great Britain, so it would be more effective to hand over the dates to Ukraine guarantees. Europeans before the guarantee, and firm the received states, and did not ask. Not because the Trump administration is not ready for such guarantees. Another obvious point is some acceptance by the European leader and those whom Donald Trump removed, in order to complete the Russian-Ukrainian guilt. Finnish President Alexander Stubb is respected as one of the European leaders closest to Trump. And you meet with an American wedding machine, and on the ridge behind him, Wolf Pete. There was no smoke in the chair of the President of Ukraine, you can't end it with Steve Vitkov and Jared Kushner. And everything in Europe is fine, of course, Dickie's political style, led by himself not by his political competence, but by his loved ones, Lime and American President Donald Trump, and Posh is not political, but a financial warehouse for you to resolve the conflict. And on the dash of Russian-Ukrainian wine, and unbeknownst to the discounts, Kushner spread investments to the power business. At the gathering by one of the wired participants in the close discount regulation. With this rank, we can also talk about the fact that Ukraine has a European one, and we can also talk about the fact that the adequacy of the European ranks is ready to realistically the American administration. And I will notify the administration's zrad and the president's readiness to add with the Russian glasses Putin behind the back. And on the tilka Ukrainians and not Europeans. And a corridor for Trump. And we know perfectly well, of course, even without the fate of Europe, there are frozen Russian assets in the bins. He also talks about realistic houses that will end the Russian-Ukrainian war. Without the fate of Europe, Ukraine really will not be able to fight Russian aggression with offensive hands in the Russian-Ukrainian war. And we will need the purchase of the American dump. The Trump administration is aware of Ukraine, and is sold by the dump for European groves and the purchase of the European dump itself. And it is extremely budgetary to help Ukraine. And until that moment, according to the European leaders, with the understanding that the Russian-Ukrainian confrontation has baked into the offensive period, at a distance for the initiatives of President Putin, It is not about Ukraine that can attack on the effective operas of Russian aggression, and on the fact that Russian President Putin will not be able to still his ambit bodies. And Putin is not, and the Europeans tesh, it is important for the territorial ambitions of the Russian president to throw out their maximum program, and the Ukrainian state will become a direct threat to the European themselves. And firm the point of view of looking at European leaders on the Maybutna of rich Russian-Ukrainian guilt. You take a look at President Trump and his associates. Although to the fact that formally on the national side of the received states, you are guilty of not swimming in. And yak sprats firm the Ukrainian territory under the control of Russia. And I am under the control of a legitimately Ukrainian order, maybe really on Jared Kushner's tilky into Donald Trump himself. By position. They often come to American soil on the basis of European confrontation and new coalitions of allies. Overgrown Tesh is such an ideal situation. A friend from your fault from getting the state was dragged for mud, for her fate in wine, in Europe, and as a result, they were arrogant to strike in Japan, as she was overestimated by an ally of the Hitlerite Reich, and overgrown with a real ally of the Russian Federation in the confrontation of authoritarian regimes, with the participating democracies of the People's Republic of China. The head of Yako and Xi Jinping is known harshly to the president with received in state to Donald Trump about his leaky Taiwan. And the dog bags firm one of the most important allies with received in state in the Asian Takkaikan region of Japan. This rank allegedly Americans are not Namagalas. And they will not be able to calm Russia will accept President Putin of their ambitions. The fault of the arrival on American soil, and Donald Trump himself, is tied up with difficult trials for the American people. And adequacy. We are not at Trump's, and not inserts in his administration. We are overestimated on the adequacy of Europeans for Russian revenge. And aggressive for President Putin is the most Russian and rich today geographically. Neither the threat on with the received states of America, nor the confrontation with the participant in the light. And the Europeans, Sasha, are overestimated as adequate. Diakuyu. Post on the channel, subscribe to it, to my social ones on the Patreon channel. And this helps to develop those resources, the sponsorship function of YouTube itself.